Hi everybody, this is the fourth episode of my series of feedback that I give to teachers most often. This time I'm doing it from my study and not the kitchen, but it's still in the same Kitchen Pedagogy series. And in this episode I'm talking about defining excellence. Quite often when I've been watching a lesson and discussing students what they're doing, they've been set off on a task and they're not entirely sure what's expected. They have a sense of that they have a job to do, but they're not quite sure, not really super clear about what it's going to look like if they've done an excellent job. At other times, you see a teacher where they've gone to some length to really explore that, where they've said in advance, okay guys, if you're going to do this job, and when you finished it, I'm going to say, wow, that was amazing, fantastic, that's exactly what I was after. What would that be like? And they've gone through it in some depth. And when that happens, it's just so clear that the students actually then do produce much better work. But if you're busy, if you're in the flow of a lesson, if you're in the flow of a day of teaching, that time to invest in advance in specifying what you expect can sometimes be missed out. So I'm suggesting to teachers that it really does pay off to take time and explore that with students in advance. So what does that mean? It means things like, for a simple task, it could mean just how many questions to do within a certain time frame, so they get an idea of the pace. This is the kind of expectation of how fast I expect you to work. And if that's not clear, sometimes students can drift and waste lots of time and kind of just dawdle. And they don't really mean to on purpose, but there isn't that necessarily a sense of urgency, compared to if you know I've got to get 5 or 6 questions done in 5 minutes or 10 minutes, then I'm going to work at a slightly higher rate and be more productive. It could be the extent of the writing, how much to write. Sometimes that is a nice simple clue to a student that knowing how big the piece of work is, they know how to pitch the pace, how to judge how fast to write, and they get a sense of the kind of the degree of the challenge. If it's something to do with the quality, then that needs some definite investment. So sometimes it could be talking about the features, the content. You need to mention these terms. It could be that you need to not make these common mistakes that we've just rehearsed. It could mean that there's some terminology which you're expecting students to include, so you expect them to make reference to that in their answer, and so they can check if they have. And so those things are quite simple to do. If it's a little bit more of a judgment, that can be hard to capture just by describing it, just like any comparative judgment assessment process. So in advance of setting a task, it's really helpful if you can show an example. So you're about to go off and do this task in this time frame, and this is the sort of thing I expect you to have done by the end. And you look at it and you might say, so can you see from this example that I've got before what they did, how much that would have taken? Think about the planning. It could be an essay, or it could be a product that you've made, or example of a piece of bookwork. Anything which gives the students a really clear example of what to pitch towards. That doesn't mean to say that you're doing a make one exactly like this, kind of Blue Peter style. It doesn't have to be like that at all. Sometimes you could show multiple examples. But I've seen this over and over again, that where students have a really clear idea that excellence will look like this, that when someone has done a superb job in this context with this type of class, this is what I'm aiming at. They just deliver a better outcome. Excellence also can be defined just in the day-to-day interactions. And a bit like when I talked about establish what you establish, if you establish that when we're talking about things, we're trying hard to put together really good answers, and you establish that as a principle, you get a lot more of it. But it can start with a simple invitation to rephrase. So if students feel that they have to produce a perfect answer straight away, that can be inhibiting, that can put people off. But if they kind of volunteer a slightly half-formed answer, and then you invite them to reframe it, let's just say that again, let's just have another go, but let's this time add the terminology, reframe that in a form which is slightly more articulate than last time, and give students a chance to redo their thinking, their public contributions. And you do that routinely, then you get a much better result from students, and they feel good for having reframed their answer in a more articulate way. And then that also then helps them to then express that in writing if you then ask them to transfer it into writing. So there are lots of different ways this can take shape. But the principle is this: define what excellence might look like, communicate it for every task, every product, and make sure through checking for understanding that the students have understood it, not that you have just simply told them. So it combines with the questioning strategy, checking for understanding. And if your student has reported back to you and the rest of the class what they understand by the features of excellence, then you really know that you're going to be onto a good chance of getting some really good outcomes in that particular activity.